All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to this school board meeting and reconvene this meeting of the Williamsburg-James City County School Board. Before I ask a member to certify closed session for us, I do want to let those of you that are here and the viewing public note that we are down a member. Dr. Beers he's dealing with a family emergency, and so we're going to take up the cause in his place this evening. With that, if I can have a member certify closed session for us, please.
I certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, the Williamsburg-James City County School Board, while in closed session, discussed only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as stated in Virginia law, and that only such public matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Ms. Aller, if you would take the roll.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hundley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. And is there a member that would approve our agenda as presented this evening?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Is there a second for our agenda?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Any discussion on our agenda before we take the roll? All right. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner. Aye. Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hundley.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. Okay. Again, thank you all for being here. A smaller crowd than we're used to, but really appreciate those of you that are here being with us this evening and taking part in this this business. Also, I want to thank two of our youngest members of our meeting, our audience, Mr. Davis McLaughlin and Mr. Spencer Carter, who at the very last minute have agreed to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would come up and take the podium, and we'll follow your lead. Everyone, if you'll rise for me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Which one's Davis and which one's Spencer? Good to meet you both. Thanks for being here.
That's great.
Right. Move on to our announcements and superintendent's report, Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. March is Disability Awareness Month, and our special education team organized a number of programs and initiatives to promote inclusion within our community. Last week, current and former students and their parents, along with SEAC members, participated in a panel discussion about disability categories reflective of students in WJCC schools and ways to promote inclusivity within our schools and the community. This Thursday, guest speaker Trela Yule, youth leader of the Virginia Department of Education's I'm Determined project, will share about her personal journey in education while promoting self-determination for individuals with disabilities. Join our special education team for this event at Williamsburg Regional Library this Thursday, March 23rd at 6:30 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Any reports from board members this evening?
Yes, I have from SEAC. Just continuing on with March Disability Awareness Month, the schools are having announcements read each morning. Also, we were given a grant to focus on enhancing orientation program for rising sixth graders who have disabilities. So that was very excited to get that. And that also we are working on making strides with the grading policy. We approved our bylaws. You will hear a little bit more about a student, Cora Smith, who just received an award. That will be in a few minutes. And we are also taking nominations for the 23-24 school year if you'd like to be on our committee. Our annual report will be given in May. And our next meeting will be April 13th at Central Office at 3 o'clock. All citizens are welcome. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Any other reports this evening from board members? Okay. Well, let's move on to our student and staff recognitions for the evening. And if I can have Ms. Hummel join me down front. Thank you.
Good evening. Tonight we are excited to recognize a War Hill High School student for her advocacy efforts that were recently recognized on an international stage. I'd like to invite Cora Smith to join my colleagues up front. Cora Smith was one of 12 international award recipients of the 2023 Council for Exceptional Children's Yes I Can Awards. Cora's efforts to advocate for appropriate representation of students with autism during Disability Awareness Month, along with bringing a student voice as a new member of the Special Education Advisory Committee, earned her a nomination for this award by the Department of Special Education and SEAC. Cora recently accepted this award in Louisville, Kentucky at the 2023 Council for Exceptional Children Annual Conference. We are thrilled to honor Cora and her achievements this evening. Congratulations, Cora. Mr. Chair, this concludes our recognition this evening.
Congratulations, Cora. Well done. Well done. We're going to move on to item 6, our public comments for the evening. I'll turn it over to Ms. Ortego.
Sorry. It is at this point in our meeting where citizens are invited to address the board. Those citizens desiring to speak have submitted speaker cards to the clerk prior to the start of tonight's meeting. These speakers are asked to come to the podium when their names are called, state their names for the record, and direct their comments to the chair of the board. It is the board's interest and desire that all comments are heard and respected. Hence, the citizens are asked not to engage in applauding, verbal outbursts, or any other type of demonstrations during the presentations. Personnel matters are not considered in public meetings. Therefore, the board requests that all speakers refrain from making reference to specific individuals in any form or fashion. Though the board does not respond to your comments are heard and appreciated. Each speaker is allocated 1 minute and 30 seconds to make their presentation, and the board asks that you respect this time limitation. Also, please be reminded that no time may be yielded to another speaker. Your acceptance and adherence to these guidelines will be greatly appreciated. Mr. Chair, my directions are concluded.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego.
First speaker is Cara McLean.
Good evening. This is to the school board and to the parents of the school system. Thank you all for your care of the students in this town and what they will learn in their classrooms. As a member of the Family Life Committee, I have been studying the Family Life material for about a year, and I am asking that you make sure that every WJCC public school know that this parent knows that this class is about to start in either at the end of April or in May. So this will be kindergarten through 9th grade in all the schools. And the fact that all the parents have the right to look at the curriculum and decide whether they want to opt their children out of any section. The school teachers will be having their material available for the parents of the children to see, so that they can decide if they want to opt out of nothing or some or all of the class. Last year, there was a lot of explicit information in my son's class, so I opted out of everything. This year, in January, the 10th grade teacher did not have any explicit things, and I kept him in the class. But I just think every year you should, as a parent, your children are precious to God and to yourself, so please be careful, because this information could change the thinking of the way they do things or think things, and some of it is questionable to me.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Thank you.
Michael Hosang.
Good evening. Though he's absent tonight, I would like to commend Dr. Beers for sticking to, or by the board's previous decision, to the initial agreed-upon proposed 8% pay increase for school employees, as opposed to succumbing to the let's change our minds at the last moment crowd and ask for something that the county will probably not likely agree to. For months, this board discussed potential pay increase and advised the superintendent and her staff to work off this 8% figure. Then at the last moment, some of you decided to change your minds, not because of anything that the administration provided to you, but because you were bullied into it by a few speakers in a crowd that demanded a 10% raise. The last time I checked, you are here for students, not for teachers, not for administrators, not for yourselves, but the students. What will the students get out of this pay raise? More failing test scores as presented at the last meeting? What assurances have you received that this pay raise will in any way improve the education that our children will receive? Why is the money not going to the students' needs, but to the wants of employees? I retired from the military after 27 years of active duty and reserve duty service. I've been a state and federal employee for over 20 years. The highest raise that I can recall ever receiving was 4.5%. I and my brothers and sisters in arms put our lives on the line every day, received less pay than the school employees, and received much smaller raises. But we also always put our mission first ahead of our wants. I hope you decide to put our children first moving forward and are not bullied into always putting them last. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hossain, and thank you for your service.
Jill Piles.
So thank you to the teachers and staff. We're almost through our first normal school year in years. My kid goes to the library every other day to study, so I looked up the controversial books and looked up our school's library book on their website, and I found Jamestown and Lafayette have Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl. This is a controversial book number 7 on, if you Google controversial books. I checked it out. I was an English major, English teacher. Started reading it. Earl is African American. He starts off using vulgar language, which is sad that the one African American. I made a little book. It was a word that the president shouldn't have used. It was like 8 times. I'm not even going to say it or talk about it. There's F-bombs 7 times in a third of the book. It just goes on: phone, sex, Earl, the African American text, the words that are offensive to women. I complained to the school board, to the high school, Lafayette High School, and the committee members last week defended the book. So I appealed to the school board for profanity and pornography policies. Please tell me what they are. We look at the outside of the child's behavior, good grades, making a lot of money, college bound, but the inside of the child is important. They're impressionable, and please get back to me. Oh, I have copies if anybody wants one.
Thank you, Ms. Piles. You can leave those with Ms. Aller, our clerk. Thank you, Ms. Piles. Do we have another?
Oh, I'm sorry. Marco Sardi.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Dr. Heron. My name is Marco Sardi, Vice President of WJCEA, and a teacher here at James Blair. On behalf of the Executive Board and the Education Association, I want to thank the board for supporting a 10% raise for staff salaries next school year. Due to your decision to support a budget based on staff needs, not wants, you have shown a commitment and willingness to listen to your employees. This is a long process, and I implore you to continue supporting your staff and allow them the type of working environment required to craft the best classrooms to support those students. I encourage you to do as I have been doing and reach out to your colleagues and counterparts on the Board of Supervisors and City Council to ensure this support continues. I thank you for your time and your efforts in hearing the needs of your employees, and on behalf of the board of the Executive Board of WJCEA, I thank you personally. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sardi.
That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Sordico. And thank you to all those who to speak this evening. I appreciate your comments and your perspectives as well. We'll move on to item 7.1, review purchase request for 4 minivans under contract EVA E194-102237. Dr. Heron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Snipes will present this evening, this item this evening.
Good evening, School Board Chair, School Board members, and Dr. Heron. Tonight's proposed agenda item supports Goal 6 of the strategic plan, and is being brought for your consideration is the review and purchase request of 4 minivans under contract EVA number 194102237. In February of 2022, we purchased 3 minivans as part of the FY21 year-end spending plan because of a national and local school bus driver shortage. We come to you tonight staff request to purchase 4 additional minivans under the same FY21 year-end spending plan in the amount of $151,630. The superintendent recommends that the school board award the purchase of these minivans to Colonial Auto Center in the amount of $151,630 under EVA contract number E194102237. I'm available for questions if you have.
And for everybody's knowledge, we will be seeing this later under action. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Snipes?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Snipes. Okay. We'll move on to our consent agenda. I'll ask for a motion in a moment for these 14 items. 8.1, approval of the financial report and monthly bills and payroll for February of 2023. Item 8.2, approval of minutes from February 21st, 23. Approval of minutes from March 7th, 23. Item 8.3. Item 8.4, approval of resolution R923, month of military child. Item 8.5, approval of resolution R10-23, school library month. Item 8.6, approval of resolution R1123, public school volunteer week. Item 8.7, approval of resolution R12-23, VSBA 2023 business honor roll. Item 8.8, approval of revisions to policy IGAC, teaching about religion. Item 8.9, approval of revisions to IGBF, limited English proficient students. Item 8.10, approval of revisions to policy GBN, staff hiring procedures. Item 8.11, approval of revisions to GCBA staff salary schedules. 8.12, approval of revisions to policy GDG, support staff probation. Item 8.13, approval of revisions to policy GCB, professional staff contracts. And finally, item 8.14, approval of retirement of policy LEA, student teaching and internships. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read this evening?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda as read.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hunley, for the second on the motion. Any discussion regarding the consent agenda? Okay. Hearing none, Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. Thank you. All right. We're going to move on to our action items. 9.1, approval of the personal actions for this evening. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve personnel actions as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Donner. Ms. Haller?
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. And we'll move on to item 9.2, approval of the fiscal year 2024 budget. Before we entertain any comments from the board, I want to offer Dr. Heron, any words that you might want to offer.
Mr. Dowell, we don't have any presentations this evening and are ready for the board to take them up to approve the budget.
Thank you, Dr. Heron. And so for this evening, we, on our agenda, have action before us to consider the modified proposed budget, operating budget, with a total fiscal year cost of $196,336. Any discussion on this?
I just have to
Oh,
read
yeah,
my
please,
disclosure.
Ms. Hundley.
As a member of the School Board of Williamsburg, James City County, I acknowledge that I may have an interest in the fiscal year 23 school budget because my husband is an employee of the WJCC schools. However, I believe that I am able to participate in consideration of and vote on the budget fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. May I ask for a motion for this action item?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the fiscal year 2024 budget in the amount of $196,336,000, which includes $176 million for the operating fund, $11,779,900 for the grants fund, $1,269,100 for the state-operated programs fund, and $7,287,000 for the Child Nutrition Services Fund.
Thank you, Ms. Donner. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Young. And so we have a motion on the floor to approve the fiscal year 2024 budget in the amount of $196,336, which includes $176 million for the operating fund, $11,779,900 for the grants fund, $1,269,100 for the state-operated programs fund, and $7,287 for the Child Nutrition Services Fund. Any discussion on this motion? Ms. Ortega.
Well, I will say that I certainly support teachers' pay increase. I believe that teachers are dealing with an unprecedented amount of work, that they are doing a tremendous job, for which I am grateful as a parent and proud as a school board member. We've been through this budget process now for several months, and our goal as a board, I know that it's true for every single person up here, our goal has always been to provide the most possible pay increase for teachers and staff. I believe that we, through a series of meetings and conversations and tough discussions, came up with a budget that did the most possible while taking into consideration a number of other factors that are part of our responsibility. The superintendent presented a budget at the last meeting, which I supported at the time, and I continue to support. I'll stay consistent. I continue to support the initial proposed budget. That budget was modified in our last meeting, and I understand my colleagues' sentiments. I know where they're coming from, and I understand where they're coming from. As such, we did go before our funding partners on Friday, and we presented that with the United Front. And since that meeting, we've been given some information that we now know a little bit more what we're working with and what they are working with, and we understand the responsibility that our county and our city have to all public workers. And so today I have to ask myself, the question is not, do I support a 10% increase for teachers? Because I do. And if you could bring a budget with a 10% increase that didn't also come with a $10.4 million shortfall, that would be lovely. But I can't in good faith support or approve a budget that has an over $10 million shortfall. So this evening I will not be voting in the affirmative.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. Any other discussion? Ms. Young?
Yes, I am in support of the 10% for our teachers. One of the things that has influenced my thinking is I think all of us on the board have spent a lot of time reviewing information and thinking about what this means. Every year I've totally supported our Board of Supervisors and City Council, and I still do. However, as a mandated elected official, I am supposed to present a budget of need to our funding partners. And I just want to remind one of the things that I took a lot of look at in I came on the board in 2016 or 2017. And since then, and I have the statistics, you can go online and, or I'd be happy to share them with you. But there were 2 years prior to that time in 2009, 2010, 2011, where our teachers received no raise at all. However, at that time, the cost of living continued to increase. And as workers for our community, they took the hit, as all community workers in the government do every time. I've known it many years. I worked in that field myself where there was no raise. The following year, 2011 to 2012, there was a 1% raise. And again, that did not meet in any way, shape, or form the cost of living that year. This year, last year, we gave a 7% raise, which, as I've said before, I think we were all very happy about, and which helped raise some of our teachers' pay. But in 2021, we had proposed, there was no raise proposed that year because we were just going into the pandemic and having a wise superintendent. We pulled back everything to make sure that our kids could continue to go to school. However, on January 1st of that year, our teachers did receive a raise, but it was not retroactive that year, and it was a 1.5% raise. Our teachers, and before I continue, I will say that I completely support our firemen and policemen in our community and our government workers. I believe that they all should be paid fairly. I do not think our teachers have fallen into that category. I think we have left them behind in some ways. And because of that, I am supporting the 10% raise for our teachers. I think it's time for them in some ways to catch up to those many years where they didn't receive any raise. And I know my son, who's in the military, last year, and he was excited because the military did receive an 8.7% raise, which was long overdue for our military members. And I think, and that really did boost morale. And my son, who at that time, he's been an E7 for a long time. He hasn't been struggling like many of the younger military members, but we're in the same boat with our younger teachers. So for that reason and that reason alone, I do support the 10% and will continue to stand by that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Ms. Donner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too support the 10% raise, and I echo what my colleagues have said. I understand that this is a tough position that our funding partners are in, that we as a school board are in. However, as I see, our teachers are on that front line, and they do care a lot about the mission. And I was actually doing our taxes this week, and as you go through doing your taxes, you realize there are all these different deductions for teachers, because that is the profession in which teachers are actually asked to come out of their own pockets in so many ways to pay. And I really have a hard time thinking of how many other professions, how many of us go to work every day where our companies are asking us to pay for the school supplies, are asking us to buy books, to bring tissues in, to do all these things that our teachers do for our students out of their own pockets. And so if you look at it in terms of a pay increase, they already take some off the top of their pay because they're giving back to the students and to the children that no one is compensating them for. They don't file expense reports to get reimbursed for that. And so given that, and given how much they've given, how hard it's been over the last few years, and as you go into the schools, and I'll have the opportunity to talk about what I've seen over the last few days as I visit these schools, these teachers are giving so much, and 10% is literally the least that we can give to as my colleague, Ms. Young, said, to allow and to show for all the times that they didn't get a raise, and they still did, and they still showed up, and they still were on the front line, and all the things that they continue to do. So I'm in full support of a 10% raise. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Donner. Ms. Hunley, and I think then Ms. Hummel. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also stand in support of the teachers' 10% raise, and I'd like to go on record on two things. First, I've always supported the 10%. I did go with the will of the board with the 8. However, in my heart, I've always, the 10% is what was there. And second, I'd like to go on board to say on record that, thank God, I've never been bullied, nor do I condone that for anyone. I would never allow anyone on this board to be bullied. And I, as a product of two parents that are on the Board of Supervisors and a father who's ex-military, they've always raised me to follow my heart and do what's best. And I do what's best for children all the time. And without teachers, our children will have no one to educate them. So I stand in full support of the 10%. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Ms. Hummel.
Thank you. I also support the 10% raise. I want to give a message of unwavering support for our teachers. We have a supply problem next year, in that teachers are voting with their feet and they're leaving this profession that they love because of insufficient pay and large class sizes and some societal issues that somehow they're dealing with in the classrooms every single day. So for me, I think supporting our teachers leads to supporting our students. I think one of our speakers today said that that we should be supporting our students instead of employees, but I think that there's a direct correlation between supporting our teachers and how that in turn supports our students. It doesn't support our students when an administrator of a school system is having to, find a teacher for someone mid-year who leaves or can't find substitute teachers to cover for a classroom. These things do not support our students. These are negative outcomes for our students. I want to try to support a budget that will lead to teachers feeling good about the profession that they chose and honoring that profession by giving them a living wage, as many of us have talked about and seen. A teacher at the very beginning, they've shown us there's literally, when you take into account health increases and inflation, they're not seeing a bottom line difference in their salaries of more than $50 or $100 in any given year for some of our beginning teachers. And that's what I really want to give a message that I want to change that for them. So that's why I'm supporting the 10%. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. What I appreciate about this board is that despite our various different perspectives and how those perspectives lead to these conversations, these moments where we have disagreement, we can continue to work and do so in a manner that shows respect and trust and civility within our work. And so I appreciate that about this board. I appreciate that about you, Dr. Herron, and the way you lead your teams as well. Without belaboring the point and belaboring this current motion, I will not be supporting the superintendent's modified, to be clear, the modified proposed budget for fiscal year 24. And that's not without a lot of consideration, a lot of just soul searching over the weekend, making phone calls to my fellow board members to discuss this thing in silos and figure out what's reasonable and what's right in this environment. And but before I really get into, and I'll be pithy, but before I get into the why of it, I want to say that I find myself agreeing with many parts of what I'm hearing in the affirmative. I also feel compelled to say that when we hear from the association, we hear from Ms. Donner, as you reiterate the things that we hear from teachers, the long hours, using their hard-earned cash to pour back into their classrooms. Those aren't just anecdotal for me. I understand that very personally within my own household, my own wife being an elementary school educator, worked in Dodds for many years in kindergarten, worked in Williamsburg private education, 4th grade and 5th grade, and now at a preschool. And it'll be midnight before she's wrapping up this evening, getting ready, getting classroom ready for next week. Anyway, in my head just now, green card stock just flashed in my head because she was frantically looking for green card stock last week for this week. Anyway, it's not because of a lack of respect for teachers, a lack of recognition of the hard work that goes into their profession. Teachers, faculty, staff support members every single day, that I personally can't see an en route to a budget shortfall essentially of about $10.6 million. It is because we sat across from those in the city and in the county, leaders who we deign to call ourselves funding partners to. And they heard us. They heard the pitch and the plea from most of us, if not all of us, in various respects, and very patiently, and then spoke as to why our budget does have real great implications upon that of the broader community. And so our budget does have implications for our school division. Teachers, the WJCEA, and then many others said we demand 10%. And we did. We took that seriously. I believe as a board, we took that seriously from day one that we heard it. And then we really had to take a look at the data. We really had to analyze the information and consider, does this help more than it hurts, or does it do the inverse? We went through a rigorous process. We asked Dr. Heron and her staff to go through a rigorous process to help us understand the implications of a 5, 7, 8, or 10% wage increase as it relates to health insurance costs, which at that time I think was in the area of, I think 15% increase over last year. Due to Dr. Heron's negotiating skills, got it down to 9.9%. But we took a number, 10%, that nobody's really been able to explain to me yet how that number came to materialize in the conversation. It looked to be a target on a board, and we asked, let's make that less of a arbitrary number, and let's build reason or rationality around that number. And since January through February, that's exactly what this board did. That's exactly what Dr. Heron and her team did on behalf of this board. That's what we asked for. And that's how we arrived at 8%. That was a number that supported more than, I believe, quite a bit more than $50 or $100 in a pay period. Is quite a bit more than that for a majority of our earners. And so listen, we did take an honest approach in considering many variations of a wage increase. We used 5%, and we used 10% as the margins. Would have been great, as Ms. Ortego suggested. 10% would be fantastic if it wouldn't cause a $10 million bubble that we're going to burst on. Our work, Dr. Heron's work, revealed that it wasn't sustainable, that it was actually going to harm the community. And as much as we would like to, and I don't remove myself from this characterization, but as much as we would like to say our business is just the school board, our business is just the school division, that's not the reality. We knocked on doors. We earned the right through an election or through an appointment to represent the entire community, and this has a entire community-wide implication. So my concern today is that if we're willing to scrap the actual work that's been taking place to arrive at a reasoned and data-driven budget, one that also, it does improve the living wages of all of our, and I want to specify that 8% does improve the living wages of all of our division employees at the moment. If we scrap that for an arbitrary number because of what feels good, having heard what our funding partners will not do, I'm afraid of what we forfeit in the coming weeks. That's my concern. to that, those are my reasons why I can't support this modified budget, though I would be happy to support the former. And I will rest my case at the moment and ask if there are any other comments before we ask Ms. Aller to take the roll. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
No.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
A regretful no. Thank you, Ms. Aller. We're going to move on to item 9.3, approval of amendment to fiscal year 23 grants fund budget. Dr. Heron?
I believe this is an action,
Oh, I'm sorry.
sir, so
Yeah. Let me catch up. Thank you.
You're fine.
If I can have a motion, because we did discuss this 2 weeks ago. Thank you. Motion to approve the amendment to fiscal year 23 grants fund budget.
Mr. Dowell, I move to approve the amendment to the FY23 grants fund budget to $18,604,064.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Donner. Any discussion? And clearly we do this because we receive more money than we originally expect. And so our grants fund budget has to zero out in the end. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. If I can have a motion to approve on item 9.4, award of contract for invitation for bid number 202307339, War Hill High School Interior Auxiliary Gym Addition.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the award of contract for invitation for bid number 202307339, War Hill High School Interior Auxiliary Gym Addition to David A. Nice Builders Incorporated in the amount of $4,623,100.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Is there a second on this motion?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Young. And so the motion is to approve award of contract for invitation for bid 202307339, War Hill High School Interior Auxiliary Gym Addition to David A. Nice Builders in the amount of $4,623,100. And was there new information on this?
Yes, just one piece of information in the recommendation and in the body of the item that included in this evening are 3 ad alternatives for the project totaling $78,000 for telescoping bleachers, acoustical wall panels, and a hoist system for the wrestling mat. Because the bid came in under budget, we were able to include those in this approval tonight and still be under budget.
Fantastic. Any questions on that new information or the process? Okay. All right. Ms. Aller?
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. Item 9.5, approval of AP Statistics Textbook Selection and Adoption Process and Textbook Committee. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the advanced placement, P Statistics Textbook Selection, and Adoption Process, and Textbook Committee as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Any discussion on this action item before we move forward? Okay. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. Item 9.6, approval of adoption and purchase request for 8th grade civics and economics textbook and textbook materials. Do we have a motion on this item?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the adoption and purchase request for the 8th grade civics and economics textbook and textbook materials to 5 Ponds Press for a total cost of $40,480.
Thank you, Ms. Donner. Is there a second?
Second.
I think that was Ms. Hummel?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hummel. So the motion is to approve the adoption and purchase request for 8th grade civics and economics textbook and textbook materials to 5 Ponds Press for a total cost of $40,480. Any discussion? I think there's new information on this as well.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ms. Ford is going to give a very brief update on this item from the proposed agenda item.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Herron. This evening, I would like to present an update on the Civics and Economics textbook purchase and request the amendment of the cost from $54,277.13 to $40,480. Yesterday, Mrs. Chisenhall, our social studies coordinator, was informed by a representative at Five Ponds Press that the revisions to their civics and economics textbook were already underway, and they anticipate being prepared to publish a digital and print edition in the summer of 2024 that will be aligned to the 2023 SOLs. With access to the revised textbook occurring much sooner than expected, we recommend that we purchase a license to the digital textbook for all students at this time. That purchase will also provide our teachers with the digital textbook resources. The current ebook is aligned to the 2015 SOLs. WJCC will receive full access to the 2024 edition of the ebook next summer for 6 additional years at no additional cost. We also recommend that we purchase 40 student copies of the current print edition for students who may need the support of a print copy of the textbook for next school year. Next spring, we will evaluate our students' need for the print editions of the Civics and Economics textbook, and we'll have the option to purchase those copies of the 2024 edition at 50% off the list price. At this time, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. And so that 50% hasn't changed. That was still the driving rationale behind moving forward early so that we might take advantage of that. But the number of books we intend to purchase now, it kind of flips, right?
It may decrease, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
okay. The question I had was, how many books did we originally intend to purchase? Did you state that already?
We
Apologize.
originally intended to purchase 870 student editions.
Okay.
At this time, we would consider our students' needs next year.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Ford while we have her? Okay. Well, thank you. That's great information because that was really the sticking point for, I think, all of us in our meeting last time. So thank you.
We were very excited to get that update.
You moved quickly on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other discussion? I'm not hearing any. So, Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. All right. Item 9.7, approval of the Special Education Annual Plan for 23-24 and the Title 6B flow-through funds. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the Special Education Annual Plan 2023-24 and the Title 5B flow-through funds.
The Title 6B.
6B, sorry, 6B, flow-through funds.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Any discussion on this item? So I'll just, hearing none, I'll just read the cost budgeted analysis. No cost to this plan provided the plan is approved prior to July 1. And if approval, the VDOE occurs after July 1. All right. Ms. Hummel, excuse me, Ms. Aller, you're both wearing the same shade of green. It's your fault. Ms. Aller.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
And Mr. Dowell.
Aye. And item 9.8, approval of purchase request for 4 minivans under contract EVA E194-102237.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the purchase request of 4 minivans under contract EVA E194-102237 to Colonial Auto Center for a total cost of $151,630.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Is there a second on this item?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Young. And so the motion is to approve the purchase request for 4 minivans under contract EVA E194-102237 to Colonial Auto Center for a total cost of $151,630. And that's the motion. Is there any discussion? Ms.
I
Ortego?
just want to ask one question, and maybe I should have done this before, but just can we, this is a cost-saving measure, is that correct? Because we were contracting out, and if we purchase these, it will actually save us money, is that correct?
Yeah, that's the hope. Mr. Snipes, do you want to speak to the use of the minivans?
Yes, we are planning to use the minivans to transport our kids who are McKinney-Vento as well as other students.
But and currently those kids are being transported through contracted
Yes,
vehicles?
currently those students are transported through contracted means.
And is the thought that owning these vehicles will save us money?
We are purchasing the vehicles, and of course, with purchasing the vehicles, we have to hire drivers, but those drivers that we hire will not need a CDL. So we're hopeful that by purchasing the vehicles, we'll be able to hire people that will be able to help us transport and reduce the contract with our third-party vendor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Any other questions for Mr. Snipes while we have him? Okay. Yep, Ms. Hummel.
So just to clarify for anyone listening, it's more difficult to hire people that have to have a CDL license than not, correct? And so in this age where we're having a really hard time getting bus drivers and people that have those CDL licenses, this is just an easy, it's cheaper for us and it's easier for us to find those drivers. Is that the general idea?
That is the general idea, yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. This service that's currently contracted for the McKinney-Vento students, that contract doesn't go away. They're still used for other students. Is that accurate?
Correct. That is just one set of students that we transport through a third-party vendor.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Ms. Holler?
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Ms. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mr. Dow.
Aye. All right, we're going to move on to our board member comments this evening. I'm going to start with Ms. Young so I don't intentionally miss Ms. Ortego. Ms. Young, can we start with you?
Yes, thank you. One of the things that's been really fun is because we're finally, this year as I've visited schools are beginning to look like schools again. And during the past week, I had the opportunity of visiting Berkeley Middle School. We've heard some comments about how teachers go above and beyond, and this is a school which I didn't know that they do a lot more to take care of their students, and I think all of our schools do. This school has actually set up a hygiene closet for students who have trouble getting ready for school for a lot of different issues. They had toothbrushes, toothpaste, many other items, plus clothing, that if a child needs clean clothing to come to school, they can come there and get clean clothing. And during the day, the nurse washes their clothes and returns them to them at the end of the day so that they'll have clean clothes for the next day. They also had a school supply closet and also provided some food for students. And that was some of of our local churches, Bruton Parish, and I believe it was New Hope. Ms. Donner can correct me on that if that's the wrong church. It helps supplement things for this school. Brought to mind how much our students and our teachers and staff do for our students. A lot more than we ever think about. I also had the opportunity today of visiting Matoka Elementary, and that is an absolutely fun school. I got to visit the kindergarten classes. It's so much fun, and the best part, because one of the things that as I retired, that was also the time when they were deciding that handwriting wasn't very important anymore, or spelling. And today, as I walk through, I actually could read students' work, because that has come back again. It comes full circle, doesn't it? Came back into the curriculum, and I observed kindergarten, and I was really surprised. Kindergartners, motor control isn't always the best, but these kids actually had excellent handwriting. And so I was really thrilled, and I want to thank the school division for recognizing how important that is to students, And as I went through, I could see that that has taken a massive effect on that school. And now when I go to schools, I'm going to be looking for that everywhere because I could read everything, and it was wonderful. And but I really enjoyed visiting our schools. It's fun to talk to principals and seeing how things are going, and it's not without issues. We are having some major issues in our school. Again, cell phone use has come up in some of our visits. I think the school board will talk more about that as we come closer to summer. Also, vaping is an issue for some of our students. These are elementary and middle school students. You can certainly see how social media has created some issues in our schools, and that's an issue that, well, I don't see that going away anytime soon. But I've enjoyed my visits. I also just wanted to say one other thing about the budget in closing. One of the things that, being a retired school teacher, if you haven't taught school, you think about the military being in the trenches. Sometimes it's where the teachers are, and I spent many a sleepless night, and I know many of our teachers do, when you're very concerned about a student. Our teachers are in the trenches, and they're working very hard to make sure that our students are successful. I've asked questions about how our students are doing academically, but there's also mental health issues, and which Dr. Beers brought up at the joint meeting. There's a lot of things going on that we just don't see. You picture this perfect little school where kids are going to school and happy and everything else. But today, when I was at Matoka, there was a dog there that is there to offer emotional support to students who just should not be having any problems. They're little. They should be enjoying you think about when you were 5 or 6. I don't remember having a single problem other than I liked being in the cooking center better than anything else when I was in kindergarten. And our students are facing a lot of different issues. And all I can say is kudos to our teachers and our staff, and working for the best interest of our students. And thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Ms. Hummel?
She was so eloquent. I really don't have a whole lot more to add to that. I went to similar middle schools, heard similar issues raised by the administration. I'm very familiar with Berkeley's efforts, and I'm sure all the middle schools probably have similar kind of efforts. I remember, and also how the community helps with those efforts. I know Rotary gives every year to the food pantry at Berkeley Middle School, and it's been, I think, 5 or 6 years now, where Ms. Chambly, I was on a school tour, and one of the teachers at the time said, "I can't teach kids who are hungry. I need to make sure that our kids' basic needs are met before I can even attempt to teach them." Is that fair that our teachers have to deal with these societal problems? No, it's not fair, but that's where we are. And so our schools are doing so much more than they had to do, 15, 20 years ago. Certainly more than when I was in school. We didn't have all the issues we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have vaping cigarettes. We didn't have all the social media kind of bullying, all of these pressures that are on our kids, and they're happening really, really at a young age. None of us adults here had to deal with any of that. And the frontline people in the trenches are our teachers. So I just, and I totally understand where my fellow board members are coming from, totally understand the issues with the big difference between our ask and what our funding partners may be able to provide. But for me, just the ask is important because it's an ask of need. And then I also just wanted, on a happy note, to say thank you so much to our Boy Scouts who came tonight. You're learning about civic duty, right? You're learning how exciting these meetings are. And I'm sure even when you don't need merit badges, you're going to come to a lot more of these meetings, aren't you? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Ms. Donner?
I thought you were coming this way.
I've got to come this way. I won't miss her.
Well, thank you. As the newest member of the school board, I'm still getting my immune system together. I've been to 4 schools, and I have had lots of lovely children and germs all over me, so hence the mask and things this evening. But I just want to say thank you to the Matthew Whaley 3rd grade teacher team. I had the opportunity to go on their field trip to the Virginia Living Museum, which was amazing. We would be so proud of how our students conducted themselves in the museum. And it was just so fun to watch our school resource officer, who we get a police escort to all of our field trips, which I didn't know. And how the kids were begging him to join their group as they were going through the museum. And I think it's just such a testament as we have our school resource officers there for safety, but the way that those officers can be integrated into our school communities, where the children see them as part of the community, as fun, as someone that they go to. And I had the opportunity to later that day to be in Carline, and he's standing out there and they're giving him, the kindergartners are hugging him, the older kids are high-fiving him and fist bumping, and it's just, that to me is what you want when you have your school resource officers as part of the community. I also got to join Mrs. Young at Berkeley Middle School, and it was just amazing as she's talking about the partnerships between a lot of the churches, so Mount Pleasant Baptist Church, Bruton Parish Church as well, and Bruton Parish Church did a Lenten clothing drive, so every week during Lent they've chosen one item to have their parishioners bring, which I think is amazing. And of course, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated for their starting of a lot of that clothing closet. But I think with that, what was so innovative is the way that they got there was the attendance committee sat together and said, how do we what are the factors that are impacting our kids' attendance, and recognizing that not having clean clothing, not having clothing they felt comfortable in, and hygiene were reasons why kids would say, I don't want to go to school. And so by doing small things to solve those problems, help to get the kids in the building where they can get their food, where they can get the education, and they can be around their peers. And I think that was just such innovative thinking at Berkeley. I also had the opportunity to go to J. Blaine Blayton and do a tour with Miss Hunley, and it was just wonderful to see all of the children and the Bright Horizons, and just it's a beautiful, wonderful school. So thank you to Mrs. Schweitzer for that tour. And then lastly, I got to be Mrs. Lamcombe's mystery reader in her 3rd grade class on St. Patrick's Day. And that was a wonderful opportunity to read to the kids a story about Women's History Month, and to hear them. There's 13 women that we talked about, and all the kids knew them and were really excited to tell me all about them. So it was a wonderful experience with that. And so I conclude in that as we're looking at all the things that are on our plates, as a board, we are put in these positions, and they're not tough. They're not easy decisions to make, especially when they bubble up to the board level. And so what I do commend is that our board has a lot of respect, a lot of great conversations, a lot of push and pull. And so I understand my colleagues and where they landed, and I also am glad that we are moving forward in support of the teachers with the 10%. And then we will see what we get from our funding partners, and we'll go forward from there. And that's the conclusion of my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Donner. Ms. Hundley.
So I'm going to say tigers, road runners, and bees. Oh my. Those are the 3 schools I went to. Again, I love being in the schools. What I really appreciated this time was talking to the administrators. And so I just want to say that as much as we worry about the teachers and want to support the teachers, the administrators are doing a wonderful job. And I'm not sure we ever say thank you to them. So I tried to make effort with each administrator to say, and thank you for what you do, because they are the leaders, and I can't imagine 30 to 80 people coming to them with all kinds of issues. So kudos to them. Also, I was super proud to have Cora Smith on our SEAC committee, the student advocate, and I did get to watch her receive her award on Facebook on Zoom. And for a student that has autism, she was the last student to come and get her award, and she owned that stage. She was so confident, and it just made me so proud because it put WJCC on the map. She just kept giving us shout outs all through the whole presentation, and I was just super proud. And also, I'm always super proud too. Went to see Shrek and went to see Anastasia, the plays, and to see I keep thinking, I mean, they were middle schoolers, but they looked like adults up there, and it just, it just warms my heart to see kids, just taking opportunities to have fun and not knowing where they're going to go from there. The sky is the limit. And it's nice, that's one of the perks as a school board member to get 2 tickets. And now my friends always saying, can I go with you? Can I go with you? Can I be your other person? Because they enjoy seeing children as well. And then to go to JBB's Community Day, to honor the giants, Dr. Blayton and Miss Gurse, who was the first African-American kindergarten teacher. And the school had vendors out there. I can't believe the kids, they had this icy, whatever you call it, van out there with the little ice, you put the colored stuff on top. I haven't had snow cones, yes. And it was freezing outside. I'm waiting to get the hot dog, and those kids are walking around with blue lips, and I don't know if it was the dye or if they were really freezing, but it was so cold, but they were just out there having a blast, and all the vendors that came out to support the school was just awesome. And I just want to just say, I just thank this board. We will be spending time together at the end of the month at our convention, and it's always nice to just have time where we can just converse with each other and talk to each other and get to know each other better. This is a board family, and I definitely appreciate each and every person up here and love each and every person. I just want to say to Miss Young, when she was talking about handwriting, I was at a best friend's daughter's shower, and she got a card, and she said to her mom, Mom, can you read this? I don't know what it says, because it was in cursive. And I was like, oh my gosh. She couldn't read it because it was in cursive. And I thought, oh my goodness. So when you said that, I'm just like, yes, I'm glad we're getting back to that. And then last, Davis, did I teach you, or is this a different Davis? Probably not. Oh, I knew there was something special about that young man. Who's your favorite kindergarten teacher? Yeah, thank you.
I was going to say, be careful. I'm after you.
I thought so. I'm super proud of you. Proud moment for ex-kindergarten teacher.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Ms. Ortega.
Yes, thank you. I got the opportunity to visit Laurel Lane Elementary School with Mr. Dow. Was it a couple weeks ago at this point? I don't remember. But we had a wonderful time visiting that school. Dr. Snow, the principal, took a really good amount of time with us and gave us a thorough tour. And it was really interesting to see how much pride she had in her school, and rightly so, because so much was evidently going very well, along with the tension of explaining to us in candor some of the extreme needs that she and her staff are trying to meet. And that's a hard tension to walk, and so I really appreciated her time and her candor, but also the fact that it's evidently a very well-run school. So that was my takeaway from that. Also want to give a shout out to the National History Day students. We've mentioned them a few times now, but the winners from Hornsby went on to a regional contest, and we have 30 students from our school division that either won first, second, or third place at regionals, and will be moving on to the state level competition in Richmond. So I think that's incredibly exciting. Again, this is all volunteer, extra work from both the teachers and the students, and so this is just really amazing to see that many students putting in the extra time and enjoying interacting with history in new and creative ways. So we wish them all the best at state competitions, I think at the end of April. And then I just briefly back to the budget situation. First of all, I want to thank the teachers for the way that they conducted themselves throughout this whole process, the way they lobbied, the way they showed up at meetings, the way they interacted at the podium or with us individually. Everyone was extremely respectful, followed, guidelines that we set in this meeting, and still managed to get their message across loud and clear. And I just think it was a really wonderful demonstration of people who were exercising their rights to lobby for what they need and want. So I just want to reiterate that the whole process has been very positive, I would say, in that sense, not just amongst us colleagues, as many people have said, and I will reiterate that we are all able to have wonderful conversations, the one-on-ones with each person, and also the interactions with the president and vice president of the Teachers Association and everyone that has spoken to us has really comported themselves in a way that they should be proud of and that I know our division can be proud of. And while it might seem like the end of the road for the budget, I'm pretty sure it's not. I think we'll be seeing it again. So this is, this is not the end of the road, and we will be having further discussions about what we're going to do with our shortfall, because that's just the nature of the game. So this to be continued. And I would encourage anyone who's interested, whether teacher or staff or member of the public, if you did not watch our joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors and City Council, that might be something that would be interesting to watch. I think that was also a very respectful meeting where people shared their passionate views, but and exchanged the nature of the situation in great detail and in a respectful way that I think would be enlightening to the public and to our division teachers and staff if you've not seen it. So I would just encourage that and say that I know, the division, the teachers, the kids, the needs are real. The needs are real. The teachers are pouring into the kids in a real way, and there are many things that are being asked of teachers that aren't even humanly possible, and that can't even be solved with money. And so we have our work cut out for us. We have a lot of hard conversations that we need to have as a board, but also as a community at large, with our funding partners, with other members of the community. I loved hearing Ms. Donner bring up examples of churches and other community organizations providing support and engagement and contribution. And I think the more we can engage as a whole community, the better off we'll all be. So that's the end of my remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. I'll lead off by, and I'll be quick. Thank you for those that, we don't often see those that started with us, end with us in these numbers. So that's really encouraging. It's pretty great. Thank you for doing that with us. Thank you, Ms. Ewing, your staff, and really everybody around Ms. Ewing right there, because you all had a huge hand in developing this budget and then even modifying it for us. Thank you, Dr. Herron, for being at the helm of that humongous effort. It just does need to be said thank you. So thank you for your work. I too was me and my wife were the last ones to walk into Berkeley Middle School for what was a packed house in the Berkeley Middle School auditorium. There was literally 4 seats left, and my wife and I got 2 of them. It was a fantastic performance, and it just went off without a hitch. They really represented their school well, and represented the division well as well. My last remark or comment, and I've said on this for a while, and I really didn't want to make this announcement in a manner that might color this work, this conversation being our budget, but I will not be seeking re-election for the school board, and that does pain me to say, to make that announcement, because I love serving. Ever since those buildings came down in New York, all I've wanted to do is give and serve. So it is with a heavy heart that I say that this will be my last year as a school board member. I'm not seeking re-election, but I know that whomever does earn the trust of the Stonehouse District will serve well as well, and probably in a better way than I have been able to in these last 3.5 years. But what I began with, I didn't want it to color these conversations, this work. This is probably the most important work that we do as a board, adopting a recommended, or in this case, a modified budget. And there are other works that we do just as eagerly and painstakingly. Don't count me out from this moment on. I'm here, right? Let me work with you. Help me to. I'm here and I'm engaged. So that's all I want to say on that front. Just I intend to work to the very last. With that, without belaboring that, I just want to move on to our upcoming events. Our 21st Century and Career Ready Advisory Committee meeting on March 29th at 3:30 in room 300 of the Central Office Annex. And then from March 31st through April 2nd, the school board, along with Dr. Herron, our superintendent, will be in Tampa at the Tampa Convention Center in Florida for the inaugural national conference of the Consortium of State School Boards Associations, COSBA, hereforth, COSBA, March 31st through the 2nd of April. And then our upcoming meetings on April 11th, we have our closed session, then work session action items at 4 and 4:30 respectively at Central Office, room 300. Then April 18th, closed session and regular meetings beginning at Central Office and then kicking over here at the gymnasium. All right, and with that, if there's nothing else, this meeting's adjourned.